everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. This is my Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show, Episode 5, Blood Calls Blood Breakdown. It's going to be a little bit different than my Easter egg and review videos, and much like my other breakdown videos, where we're going to go through the entire episode scene by scene. We'll talk about how it differs from the books, and let's face it, this episode does differ from the books quite a lot. And we're going to explain some scenes and things that are happening because when they edited this episode, they cut out a ton of stuff and they are missing a few things here and there. So we're going to talk about all of that in this particular video. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what I do here, I cover everything and anything to do with the Sony and Amazon Wheel of Time show. So if you like Wheel of Time content, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm putting out at least one video every single day, and that's everything from breakdowns and whatnot for each episode to news, leaks, castings. I cover it all here in the channel. So make sure you're subscribed. Now, all of that being said, spoiler warning, in this video we're going to talk about Episode 5 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show, which means if you haven't watched at least the first 5 episodes of the first season, I'm going to spoil things from all of those episodes. Also, we're going to talk about elements from the first 3 books of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. That's The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn. So if you haven't read those books, be forewarned, I'm going to spoil things from those books as well, and they're probably going to end up in the show, just so you know. Alright, all of that being said, let's get on to the video. In the opening sequence of the episode, we get this. It's basically a little bit of backstory, and we're talking about where they're going and what's going on. And we get to see Stepin. Now, Stepin here, he is Karina's warder, or was Karina's warder. And in the last episode, she died, and he sort of went into a little bit of a warder rage attack Logain, which was not great for anyone involved. Nynaeve healed everyone at the very end of that episode. She basically went Super Saiyan. It was kind of cool to watch. But this episode starts out 1 month later, so they've been on the road for a full month. Now, during this opening scene, Moiraine says something that's very, very telling. What she says is that he'll complete his task, or his duty. His last order was essentially to bring Karina's ring to the tower. Now, we know for a fact from the book series, and again, we're talking about the book series here, that warders, when their Aes Sedai dies, one of two things happens. Either become completely despondent and they give up the will to live, or they rage, like just completely rage and try to avenge her and they die that way. Either way, most times when warders lose their Aes Sedai, they also die unless their bond can be passed on to someone else and then another Aes Sedai looks after them. All of that is covered in this episode. So essentially we have a ton of exposition in this episode and a ton of world building. A lot of it isn't in the books. Now, I think what they've chosen to do here is they've created a mini storyline in the books, and that covers most of this episode to explain a lot of things that are going on, so they don't have to try to go into explanation later on in the series or in this season for certain elements, such as the warder bond, how they react with their Aes Sedai, and what goes on. Now, I think this is pretty important that he was given basically a task to bring her ring to the tower, because that is what kept him going so far, at least in my mind anyway. Alright, now we cut to Rand and Mat, and they're entering Tar Valon for the first time, and this is their very first experience with a big city, and we get this. We have our very first curse from the books. Now, for non-book readers, you're probably wondering, what does blood and ashes mean? Well, in the books, they basically made up an entire language of curses that aren't really curse words. So far in the show, we've seen a ton of different stuff, all paralleling what we would use in the English language as curses. But in the books, it's blood and ashes, light, flaming, sheep's wallop, mother's milk in a cup, all kinds of little different weird sayings that are considered curses, and this is our first look at them, and this is a big nod to the fans of the books. Now, this particular full segment scene here basically shows Rand and Mat entering Tar Valon, and they go down to an inn. Now, the bonus material for episode 5, as well as all the leaks, called it the Light's Blessing, which is a play on words to the Queen's Blessing. Now, a lot of these events that we're seeing in this episode with Rand and Mat were supposed to happen in Caemlyn. In the book series, after the Fade kills Tom and Whitebridge, they basically make their way on their own to Caemlyn because that's where Tom told them there would be an innkeeper that would help them out. Now, while in Caemlyn, a few events happened there that we're not going to see in the show at all, I don't believe, and one of them involves Rand climbing basically a big garden wall and falling into the gardens of the royal palace and meeting the royal family. One of my most favorite scenes in the book, where he meets Elaine, Gawain, Galad, Elaida, Morghese, and the entire Andorian royal family. All cut. We're not going to see that. What they've done instead is they have Rand and Mat entering their biggest city for the first time, and they're very awestruck. They look around at different things. Mat's really playing up being sick by the dagger, and they head to the inn, the Light's Blessing. Once they're there, they go inside, and there's talk of an innkeeper that Tom told them about, but we don't really get to see it. Now, It's a little bit weird here because they go from going inside and then we cut to another scene where they're directly in the room. We don't see the common room, we don't get to see the feel of the inn, and we definitely don't get to see the innkeeper Basil Gill. However, I think that's basically just to save time. It's weird how they edited it. However, again, the episodes are only about an hour long. There are only 8 episodes in the season. Amazon basically left a lot of this on the cutting room floor. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the events of Caemlyn happening in Tar Valon with a few major changes. Alright, now we have a scene with Nynaeve in the Warders' quarters. So this is a little bit different from the books. Well, let's say it's a lot different from the books. Essentially, every single tower scene in this episode doesn't happen in the books. There are small nods to book fans and book readers who have read the books and will understand a few references here and there. However, all of it is completely new. Now, this particular scene where Nynaeve and Moiraine and Lan are talking set up a couple of different things. They talk about the Warder's quarters and how she's safe there. Basically, the Aes Sedai aren't going to go there because they're kind of steeped in tradition. And the fact that Nynaeve can channel, that she can touch the true source. They talk just a bit about that because in the end of the last episode, she basically went Super Saiyan and healed a whole bunch of people all at once. Now, these conversations happen at different times in the book series, but essentially what they're doing is they're condensing it all and they're basically using this episode as a giant exposition dump to explain a bunch of different things. So again, these particular scenes don't happen. However, they do have some bearing on the story because they're explaining what's going on. We then cut to Perrin and Egwene's story. So essentially they're with the Tinkers at this point and they encounter the Whitecloaks. Now the Whitecloaks are trying to take them basically because they've seen them before and they believe they're suspicious. We get into a little bit more why later on in the episode. However, again, these scenes don't exactly happen this way in the books. Now, in the books, Perrin and Egwene meet a man called Elias. He leads them to the Tinkers. He tells Perrin he can talk to wolves. They talk about it quite a bit. And it basically, all of those chapters are an exposition dump. How the Tinkers interact with the world, how Perrin can talk to wolves, what the Way of the Leaf is. And we've sort of seen some of those elements in the show so far because they've explained it. However, we have no Elias. So in the end, in the book series, what happens is Elias takes Perrin and Egwene and he leaves the Tinkers and they kind of start on their journey. Now, they get basically ambushed by a ton of ravens and they have to make their way into a steading where they don't believe the Dark One's eyes will follow. And once they're in there, they find a suitable camping spot and then they're accosted by the Whitecloaks. This is when Elias gets injured and we don't see him again for quite some time in the books, and the wolves fight the Whitecloaks, and Perrin ends up killing a couple Whitecloaks. Now, that's pretty important for later on. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. In the show, however, we have no Elias, they don't leave the Tinkers, and there's no steading. Essentially, what they did instead is they had them meet the Whitecloaks outside the city bridges of Tar Valon. Now, a lot of people said, well, why would the Whitecloaks be operating that close to Tar Valon? They do, all the time. The Tower Guard has no power, essentially, outside on the other side of the river, and the Whitecloaks hassle people all the time in the books across the river. Now, they're usually run off by the Tower Guard in small starts here and there, and then the younglings are out fighting them at different points. However, it's normal. So, seeing this scene, although not in the books, it does set up the normalcy of the Whitecloaks right outside Tar Valon, and it shows that the exact reach of the Aes Sedai and the White Tower's power only goes as far as those bridges. Now here, essentially, Valda is going to kidnap Egwene and Perrin because he's seen them before and he has some questions for them. He's a questioner. We don't see that specifically in the books. Instead, like I said before, Perrin kills a couple of Whitecloaks because they're killing his wolf friends, and then they basically arrest and kidnap Perrin and Egwene at that point. Here, they're just being taken because they've been seen before and Valda has some questions. This next scene is an iconic one from the books, and it happens almost exactly the same way as it does in the books, and I loved it for a lot of different reasons. Essentially, in the book series, while Mat and Rand are in the Queen's Blessing in an inn in Caemlyn, Mat is in bed because he's sick, and Rand goes down to the library. That's where he meets Loial, and this is Loial right here. So essentially, we don't get to see a lot of different movement around the city like we did in the Eye of the World. We don't get to see them in Caemlyn. We don't get to see the common room or him talking to Basil Gill or Lamgwin or any of the other characters that are there, but we do cut right to a library scene. And I think this is included mainly because it's super important because it introduces Loial's character. Loial's an Ogier. He's, in the book series, exceptionally tall. He does not have a beard because, well, a 90-year-old Ogier is too young to have a beard. And he has drooping eyelashes, big long ears with tufts of hair on them, and his eyes are the size of teacups. The appearance is a little bit different in the show. Now, Rafe Judkins, the showrunner, has come out and said basically they went with this sort of appearance for Loial because it's something that they can do without a lot of expense, without any heavy CG or heavy prosthetics, with a lot of animatronics and movement in them, and it saves them some money so they can have Loial in more scenes. Because if they had to have more money to have him on screen, they would have him in less scenes, and he really liked his character. Now, there has been a ton of reservations about how Loial looks in the fandom. However, as soon as Hammond opened his mouth, we all knew he was Loial, and he's a fantastic actor, and he brought the character to life. So, this particular scene is almost word for word pulled from the pages of the book, except for the fact that it happens in Tar Valon and not in Camelin. Now we have this, the False Dragon's Procession. Essentially, what happens in the Eye of the World is Logain is being paraded through the streets of Camelin, and as he is, we see him see Rand. He laughs in the book, but that's all we know. We don't know anything else until much later on in the book series. But essentially, and this is a small spoiler beyond the third book, and I do apologize for it, it's probably looking at book, I would say, 5 at this point, maybe 4, but we'll go with 5 just to be sure. And it's just one sentence. Logain has the ability to see Ta'veren, and he's seen Rand, and he knew that he would shake the world. So there's that. Now, you feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. That might have been from book 2, book 3. I can't really remember right now. I didn't look it up before I did the video. But essentially, what he's doing here is all of this is from Mat's perspective. Now, something I've noticed about the show is each particular scene seems to be from a different character's perspective, much like the book series is. Now, in the book series, if the scene is from Rand's perspective, we only know what Rand knows. And so some information is wrong, some views are skewed, some facts are twisted, same as if it's from Mat or Moraine's or Lan's. Anytime you get a perspective from a chapter from a perspective of a character, things shift to everything they know. Now, this seems to be from Mat's perspective. Now, it's almost as if Mat is hallucinating, and the corruption from the dagger from Shader Logoth is causing him to go a little bit wonky here, and he thinks that Logain is looking directly at him and just cackling, when in fact he's probably looking at Rand, seeing his Ta'veren-ness, and laughing about that. But this scene in the book series, again, like I said, happens in Camelin. It's very short, and it is just before when Rand falls into the Royal Gardens. In the show, again, none of that happens, except we do get to see the procession, and they're going to the Tower instead of the Royal Palace. Alright, so this next scene happens in the Tower and is with the Warders. And basically we have Stepin, Lan, Yvonne, Maxim, and they're all kind of talking together. So all the Warders are together in the Warders' quarters, and they're talking about what's going on. They're talking about Stepin's past, and basically this doesn't happen in the books at all. Now, a lot of these little tidbits kind of happen throughout the book series here and there when Warders interact, but what they're doing now is they're humanizing the Warders, and essentially they're showing that they're real people. A lot of people were very upset about this episode and the fact that they believe that Warders should be completely stoic warriors, show no emotion, and do nothing other than just kill and be silent. And a lot of people thought that of Lan as well. However, a lot of the character traits that these Warders possess are showcased in the books, such as emotion. Lan has a lot of emotion in the books. He openly weeps a bunch of times. He recites poetry. He's very well-rounded, especially in some of the earlier books in New Spring. He showcases a lot of his character. When we do get to see Lan, it's from other people's perspectives. So we get to see it from the Emonsfielders' perspectives, Nynaeve's perspective, and it shows him as a very stoic, reserved individual. I like the fact that they humanize the Warders here, and that's basically what they're talking about. Now, this whole episode centers around loss, and it talks about what happens to a Warder when an Aes Sedai and the Warder basically part ways when the Aes Sedai dies. This is explained a few times in the books, but not till much later, and again in small little bits here and there. This way they've gotten it all out of the way in one shot while humanizing the Warders and basically setting them up as real people rather than just these mythical warriors that the Emonsfielders see them as. Now we cut back to the Whitecloak encampment with Perrin and Egwene after they've been captured and kidnapped by Valda. Now this particular scene, again, doesn't really play out this way in the books, but something similar does happen. He does threaten to torture the two Emonsfielders in the books, and basically is trying to get their story and extract information out of them. Now, in the show, Valda is essentially a complete fanatic, and he is assuming that Egwene can channel. Now, there's a bunch of different stuff going on here, and there's a lot of questions when it comes to these scenes, but these scenes are pretty disturbing, and they showcase the brutality of the Whitecloaks while basically showing what they do to women who can channel. Now, this chair has straps in the arms where they hold their hands down, and they cut their hands off if they find out they can channel. Egwene is given a choice here where she can either choose to die and Perrin will live, or Perrin will die and she will live, and all she has to do is channel the one power to do so. Now, a lot of people said, well, how does Valda know that Egwene can channel? Well, he doesn't. I don't believe he does in any way, shape, or form. These tactics were employed a bunch of different times in the book series, and it's basically said that questioners would go about questioning their victims, already knowing the answers they want in the beginning, and they would question them until they got those answers, and they generally did. So I think what would have happened here is I don't think he would have ever let her go. Even if he had killed Perrin, he probably would have continued to torture her until she claimed she was an Aes Sedai or claimed she could channel one power, even though she really can, but let's say she couldn't. She would say those things anyway to save herself, and then he would kill her either way. These scenes here, again, are changed a little bit from the books, because in the book series, Moiraine, Lan, and Nynaeve show up and basically save the day, and they rescue them, along with some wolves. These scenes are a bit different because there is no rescue party other than the wolves, but it's a great way to showcase the brutality of the Whitecloaks, especially the Questioners, and set up Valda as a supreme bad guy for much later on. Alright, so a couple of important things happen in these scenes here. So essentially, we're back in the tower with Nynaeve, and Stepin comes to Nynaeve and basically asks for some tea to help him sleep. Now, it's implied that he can't sleep because as he falls asleep, he finds peace, and he forgets the pain of losing Karina, which is all he has left of her. Very touching scene. Now, there's some nefarious purposes here for getting the tea for a different reason. We'll talk about that in the next scene. However, it's a really nice, touching moment and showcases Nynaeve's skill with the herbs. From then, Nynaeve goes out into the hallway and she talks with Liandrin. Now, Liandrin is, I gave a spoiler warning for the first 3 books. For lack of a better term, she's a dark friend and a member of the Black Aja. And she does do some horrible stuff in the books. We don't know that what's exactly yet in this particular episode. However, we are getting the feeling that she's not exactly a good person. When she talks to Nynaeve, she mentions something about persimmons in the gardens and that they're in season. So why doesn't Nynaeve go out and take a look at them? Now, there's been a lot of speculation on that particular line in this episode. Now, in my Easter egg episode, I talked about it a bit and basically said the persimmons were used to tell the weather, especially in the winter. So I thought it was a dig at the fact that she was a wisdom and she was a herbalist. And it also has red and yellow leaves in the fall. Now, I'm not quite sure when this is taking place because you had Winter Night, which is supposed to be heralding the beginning of spring, and the whole point of the book series in the first book is that the seasons aren't changing as well as they should, and that's the case throughout most of the book series. It's a common theme. They haven't really talked about that at all in the show, so I don't know if Winter Night is still in the spring when crops are supposed to start coming up in the ground and it was a celebration of the coming of spring, or if maybe for some reason they decided to shift it to the fall. Because, let's face it, if it's the spring, and Winter Night is correct, persimmons are not in season whatsoever, and that's the first lie that we catch an Aes Sedai in, and it does showcase that she's Black Aja. If they decided for whatever reason to flip the seasons on their head, and it's fall, well, it makes a little more sense, and the leaves are yellow and red in the fall, and it showcases the difference between Nynaeve choosing yellow Aja and Liandrin being a red. Again, I don't really know what they meant by this, and it's a big theory right now that perhaps, just perhaps, she was telling a lie here and that this is showcasing she's Black Aja. But then again, later on in this episode, we do see Alana sitting on a bed eating a persimmon with a knife, and she did say on Twitter she did that just because she wanted to. Did she get it from the gardens? Are they actually in season during this time? I have no idea. Let me know in the comments down below what you folks think, because this is a really, really big sticking point right now with some people, and they basically are convinced that Liandrin has told a lie on screen for the first time, and it was kind of obvious. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this scene is that Liandrin sends Nynaeve to the gardens, and that's a really important fact because there's a bunch of scenes that were cut out in between this and the next scene, and we'll talk about those in a second. Alright, now we're back in the inn with Mat and Rand and Loial. And Loial, lo and behold, brings Nynaeve in. He basically just does a kind of a reveal that, oh, I'm an Ogier, I have access to the Tower Gardens. I went there and I saw this lady walking there and she's an intricate braid like the woman you're talking about. So I brought her back because she's your friend. In my mind, I had to watch the scene a couple times because I just didn't like how it was set up. However, it's all editing. The acting was great. But there are some deleted scenes here where Loial's actually in the Tower Gardens and they showcase him in behind-the-scenes footage. Now, at this point, what I'm imploring everybody to do is, as the episodes come out, watch all the extra stuff. It'll make the episodes make a whole lot more sense, because they're explaining things that they're not explaining in the episodes. They're showcasing deleted scenes that really should have stayed in there. When Amazon went hard and fast on that no more than an hour runtime, no more than 8 episodes per season, I personally think it hurt the show a little bit. I love the show, I love the acting, everything else, but again, the editing, they cut too much. Now, this particular scene does not happen this way in the books. So essentially what happens is, in the books, everyone shows up at the inn in Camelin. That's just what happens. You have Moiraine, Lan, Nynaeve, Egwene, and Perrin. They all show up there. They're all together, and they find Mat and Rand there. Now, when they go in, Moiraine sees Mat sick, heals him just a bit, so he's up on his feet a little bit, and then they all get to meet Loial, and it's kind of a big reveal type moment. It's a very cool scene. I really liked it. And that's when they find out that they're going to be traveling out of the city, going to the borderlands, and they're probably going to have to use the ways, and lo and behold, they have an Ogier, and they need an Ogier guide to take them through the ways. None of that's happening here. So essentially, the show has basically took Nynaeve here to see Mat and Rand, so you know they're in the city, you know what's going on here. Then they have that little conversation between between Rand and Nynaeve. And that conversation is about Mat first, where it's basically hitting you in the face with the shovel, telling you that Mat's a dragon. So they're doing a really, really good job of selling everybody but Rand as the dragon at this point. And then you have that story about the breakbone fever. Now, that seems really weird to throw in there without any context. Now, in the book series, essentially the story is there because when Nynaeve was young, she healed Egwene when she had breakbone fever. The wisdom at the time was concerned that she had done something, given her something to make her better, and Nynaeve hadn't. And that was the whole story. Because of that, because Nynaeve has healed her, she has an affinity for her, and she can sense her when she's nearby. And that was sort of a plot device used in the books. It wasn't even mentioned a little bit here. Maybe we'll see it later on, maybe not. I have no idea. Maybe that's how they'll find Egwene and Perrin outside the city. I don't know. But I'm really hoping that in the next episode, we actually do get to see the scenes where everyone meets Loial in the tower, because I liked that when they did that in the Inn in Camelin. Alright, so now we're back to Perrin and Egwene in the Whitecloak camp, and we get this particular scene here, which would not have been uncommon in a horror movie. So essentially, Egwene sort of tricks Valda a little bit. She channels just a bit, throws a fireball as a distraction, but burns the ropes that are holding Perrin so he can get up. Now, Perrin's eyes are golden at this point, which I assume during the show means he's communicating with the wolves, because it's shifting from gold to his regular color, and it seems to be as he's talking to them. And at this point, he goes sort of savage and feral, where he's more beast than man, and he's almost like a werewolf. I got very American Werewolf in London vibes from this, or any other old horror movie, with werewolves in them. He's even moving kind of like a horror movie monster. And he's not himself. He's growling, he's snarling, and Valda basically says, "What are you? You're a monster." So Perrin doesn't kill any Whitecloaks here, at least that we see. This is how they escape. Basically, Egwene stabs Valda, they get outside, she takes the rings with her, and they book it. They get out of the camp, they talk to who I believe is Hopper, one of the wolves, and they take off. Now, in the book series, again, this happens very differently. Moiraine, Lan, and Nynaeve rescue them, so then they're all together as they travel to Camelin. And there was a little nod to that in one of the other episodes where they talked about sneaking into a camp at night using lightning as a distraction, because that's what happened. That's essentially what Moiraine did. Now, in the show, I don't know how they're going to bill Perrin as a dark friend, other than the fact that Valda thinks he's a monster, which, let's face it, for a Whitecloak, especially Questioner, that's more than enough. In the book series, however, he killed Whitecloaks, and that's a very big part of his character and plot device for the first few books. So I'm really interested to see how they play that out. But this scene is completely different, because in the books at this point, he can sort of kind of talk to the wolves a little bit, but he knows what he's doing and he understands what it is, so he's not scared, he's not worried about it, he knows it's a thing. In the show, though, he has no idea because he hasn't had a guide yet. Alright, now we get the scene with Stepin and Lan, and essentially he's talking about these little figurines, these idols he has, and they're Forsaken idols. He talks about them, he names a Shamael, he says he's basically using them to ward off evil and ward off the Forsaken. Again, this does not happen in the books whatsoever, although they have not really explained much about the Forsaken, much about the Dark One. You don't really have that exposition dump just yet, so I think this scene was added essentially just to kind of explain who the Forsaken were, what was going on with them, and who some of them are. Now, we only get to see 8 statues in this particular scene, so there's been a lot of talk about Are we only getting 8 Forsaken instead of 13? There was also only 8 sisters with Logain. It usually takes 13 traditionally to hold a man who could to gentle a man, but it definitely takes 13 sisters in a circle to hold a man's shield. 8 by tradition, or sorry, 6 by tradition. But there seem to be taking the number 13 and kind of shifting it down to 8 in the show. So instead of 13 sisters, it was 8 with Logain. Instead of 13 Forsaken, I've only seen 8 here. Again, maybe he had an incomplete set. Amazon lost a couple of his boxes. Maybe they're there, but we didn't see them on the screen. I have no idea, but I did count 8. And most of the big ones, I believe, are there. Shamael, Mogadin, Ravin, Asmodean, Samael. They all seem to be there. And again, probably mispronounced some of those names. I do apologize. But this is just a pure exposition dump scene, and it's really a nice scene to see between Lan and Stepin. All right, now we have this scene here. This is where Lan essentially has been drugged. So Stepin drugged him at night, and Lan was essentially on suicide watch for him. So he was there with his friend to make sure that he didn't do anything untoward overnight. And he got drugged, he fell asleep, he woke up, and he was gone. Now, he does run through the corridors, and he does find him. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that there's a gray man in the tower, that a gray man killed Stepin, that Stepin didn't kill himself. And I have no idea. It's implied that he kills himself in the show. The dagger that's embedded in him is the same dagger that's missing from his room when it cuts to that scene. It's the exact same hilt, handle, and blade. So there's that big display of daggers on the shelf. One of them is missing when he wakes up. This is that same dagger. So unless the gray man took that dagger and killed himself with it, I think it's kind of a little bit of a weak theory. I really do think he probably killed himself because he was at that point wanting to die anyway. Now, this sets up a couple of different things. It does showcase that a warder essentially just wants to die after his Aes Sedai dies. He completed his mission, his last task given to him, which is bringing the ring back to the tower, and he, was done. He didn't want to be bonded to another Aes Sedai. He just wanted to join Karina in death. Now, again, these scenes, including the funeral at the end that we're going to talk about here in a second, did not happen in the books whatsoever. They're not even close to anything that's in the books. However, they do get to showcase and talk about the bond, what happens to a warder, and how tower politics works. So I think that's why they were all added in, because it did build the world just a little bit. All right, so now we have this scene. This is a really powerful, really, really unnerving scene. Again, does not happen in the books whatsoever, so I can't compare it to what goes on there. But I think it was included for a couple of different reasons. This showcases the warders. They actually have a culture. There are a bunch of different traditions and things that warders do, especially borderlanders. And they're talked about a couple of times in the books, but it's never truly showcased. So we don't get to see behind the veil, so to speak, and get to see the warders interacting with each other a whole lot. There's not a whole bunch of warder chapters where they do different things, so we don't get to see these things. I think this is building on that, because I think the warders are going to become much more important characters in the book series, or in the show rather than in the book series. I think they're going to become more human, and that's what this is doing. It's essentially painting them all as human. They have rituals, they have rights, and they have friends, and they have emotion. Now, this has gotten a little bit of flack from some of the book readers because they are right up front and they're saying this is not Lan's character whatsoever. I completely disagree. I'm going to let you know why, and this may not be a popular opinion, and if you disagree with me, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this. Lan was a very complex man. A lot of the times you see him in the book series from other people's perspective, so the Emond's Fielders and different people see him as a stoic warrior because that is what he projected throughout most of the series. However, when he's with Nynaeve, he's loving, he's tender, he cries, he gets upset. There's all kinds of things that happen there. When he talks about Moraine and is with Moraine, there's a lot of really tender moments there too. He is a man of many layers, kind of like Shrek is. You got the layers like an onion. He likes poetry. There's all kinds of different stuff about him that really aren't explored too heavily in the book series. However, they're alluded to and they're mentioned quite a bit. I think all they're doing here is they're showcasing that on the screen. Now, the other side of this coin is he was commanded to showcase everyone's grief. Now, this is a ritual. It's set up like a ritual. I watch a lot of K-dramas and foreign media, and so does my wife, so we sort of recognized little bits and pieces of this particular, what they're doing on the screen here, because this is sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of different funeral rites and traditions from all over the world, where it's normal for one person to show grief for everyone else in the room. They can all remain stoic while one person grieves for everyone else. And that's what they've done here. He was commanded to do so, so he's doing it. Again, just because he cried on screen and humanized him just a little bit, some people get very upset and they say it's not his character. I tend to disagree. I think this is completely his character. But again, let me know in the comments down below what you think. So, that is our episode 5 breakdown. We've gone through pretty much the whole episode. Like I said before at the beginning, a lot of this did not happen in the book series whatsoever. There was a whole lot of focus on the tower, a whole lot of focus on the warders, a whole lot of focus on funeral rites and different things going on there. And it got us to see a lot of things that happen in the tower and that are going on there, and it was a lot of world building. This is one of those mid-season episodes where they're building back up. We had a really exciting episode 4. They toned it down here. Everything slowed down. There was a lot of character development, a lot of exposition dumps, a lot of talking, but it was necessary, I think, for the viewers, because we're going to get into the home stretch here. We're talking episodes 6, 7, and 8, and 7 and 8 are supposed to just knock your socks off, apparently, in terms of action and what's going on. So I think we'll see some more setup in 6, maybe some excitement near the end of 6, and then 7 and 8 is just going to be full tilt right till the end. So that's my thoughts anyway. All right, let me know what you folks think in the comments down below. Thank you so very much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.